Back in April of this year, I covered the Belgian contribution to the Battle of the Imjin River. However, it was not the only battle that the BUNC, Belgian United Nations Command, would be involved in during their time in Korea. Their next engagement would be fought on their own terms against overwhelming odds. But before we begin, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel. It means a lot. Thank you. After their time serving on the Imjin with the 29th Infantry Brigade, the Belgians were turned over to the American 3rd Infantry Division and were put under the command of the 15th Infantry Regiment, whose motto, Can Do, was adopted by the BUNC as Belgians Can Do Too. By this point of the war, the Belgians were under strength as many volunteers had been rotated back to Belgium after their stint in the conflict had come to an end. The BUNC troops were sent to an area just in front of the US 65th Infantry Regiment on a series of hills known as Haktang Ni, or Broken Arrow, and also dubbed Hill 391 by the American troops in the area. A 1,500 metre long ridgeline that is situated in what is now North Korea. B and C companies of the BUNC dug in on the 9th of October, and they were supported by a 40-man strong heavy weapons company that had the use of American-made 30 caliber machine guns, M20 recoilless rifles, and flamethrowers. They positioned themselves on a peak behind the infantry. Little did they know the events that would transpire over the next couple of days. On the 10th of October 1951, Chinese artillery fire hammered into the Belgian lines. The Chinese People's Liberation Army also launched a series of fighting patrols up into the Belgian lines, but were held back with small arms fire and hand grenades, with American artillery strikes being called in by the Belgians to keep the PLA at bay. However, this was only the start of the battle, and the Chinese would soon bring up more men to bear upon this small UN detachment. At 2300 hours, a large attack by Chinese troops was launched between B and C companies and the heavy weapons company. The Belgians were soon cut off from each other and were being attacked from all sides. During this attack, there were many acts of individual bravery and heroism by members of the heavy weapons company, as they fought hard to keep the enemy at bay. Corporal Deprins of the Pioneer Platoon was awarded the Croix de Guerre with Palm. His medal citation detailed his bravery during the battle. After having used all the ammunition of his machine gun, he tried to stop the enemy attacks with a flamethrower. When the weapon malfunctioned, he maintained his cool and covered his fellow combatant's flamethrower by aiming several hand grenades at the enemy. Through lack of ammunition, he withdrew to his platoon sub-commander and borrowed hand grenades from him. This allowed him to save the lives of his sub-commander and his section chief during the withdrawal. The fighting was fierce upon the hills, but the Belgians punched above their weight as they had done on the Imjin months before. Friendly mortar and artillery fire was called in dangerously close to Belgian positions in order to quell the ferocious Chinese attacks. B and C companies were also battling hard to keep their positions. Warrant Officer de Buck of C Company was tasked with leading a patrol to assess the PLA positions during the fighting. This citation detailed his actions on the 13th of October. Despite fire from light armament, automatic fire and mortar fire, which was aimed at his platoon from three sides, he accomplished his mission calmly, intelligently, and accurately. He has returned to his platoon to friendly lines without losses, thanks to his cool and his influence on his men. By 1 a.m. in the morning of the 13th, the Chinese attack seemed to ebb away, and by 2 a.m. a renewed attack was launched again at the heavy weapons team, but they held firm and stopped the BUNC from being overrun. When dawn broke over Haktang Ni, the Belgians could finally see the aftermath of the battle. 98 Chinese killed in action were counted in front of their own lines, and a post-battle examination concluded they'd most likely been attacked by several battalions of the PLA of the 141st Division, with at least 3 infantry companies being launched at the heavy weapons company alone. However, the true number of Chinese troops lost during the battle is disputed, as PLA patrols were seen removing dead and wounded during the early morning of the 13th. Amazingly, the Belgians only suffered 10 men killed in action, with 14 wounded. The Belgian contribution to the war in Korea may have been small in terms of manpower and war materiel, but one thing is certain to me: their fighting spirit, whether it be on the Imjin while the hills of Haktang Ni should not be forgotten within the history of the war. Their courage in the face of adversity time and time again makes their time in Korea worth remembering. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe and share, and I'll catch you again in the next one.